Other interesting political news, you have the United Auto Workers filing an unfair labor practice against the National Relations Board. As a wise man on the street once told me, gangs protect gangs, unquote. Now, I should also clarify, I believe everyone has the right to be a part of a union. I would never do that. I respect that. I would never break up a union at my companies or anything. I would always want that. But you actually have to clarify every joke you make about these institutions because they'll investigate your company if you make a joke about them. Yeah, it's something that happened to the Daily Wire, actually, Ben Shapiro, the co-owner. Now, the United Auto Workers, specifically, their union has filed an unfair labor practice against General Motors and Stellantis. Now, Stellantis is the parent company behind Chrysler, which also owns Jeep, and Stellantis also owns a bunch of other brands in Europe. They actually bought the company out because the unions bankrupted them back in 2009. So it's not even, many would argue it's no longer American. Also, the Charger is made in Canada. Canadian muscle just doesn't have the same appeal. Same with the Camaro. About 53% of GM cars are actually made in America. I digress for now. Now, it looks like last Thursday the filings followed the companies not responding to the union's demands in a timely manner. The most ironic thing on the planet, unions who get paid to take the longest amount of time to complete a task and to just work there, not the results, they just get paid to have a tenure. They're complaining that GM is taking too long to do something. That is the prime example of the pot calling the kettle black. Now, in a letter, they say, quote, GM and Stellantis' willful refusal to bargain in good faith is not only insulting and counterproductive, it's also illegal. Who is this? This President Fain said during a Facebook Live. That's why today our union filed an unfair labor practice charges, or ULPS, against both GM and Stellantis with the National Labor Relations Board. Now, Stellantis did reply in a filing. They said, quote, this is from Stellantis, this is a claim with no basis in fact, and we are disappointed to learn that Mr. Fain is more focused on filing frivolous legal charges than actually bargaining. Now, quote, also emailed a separate statement saying, quote, we will vigorously defend this charge when the time comes, but right now we are more focusing on continuing to bargain in good faith for a new agreement. We will not follow Mr. Fain's tactic to distract us from the important work to secure the future for our employees, unquote. Which, again, when it comes to the outlook of American automotive companies, I would say the outlook is not good. Again, these unions are kneecapping them at the most inopportune time. A good metaphor for what they do in general. But these companies need to transform right now. Now, again, I'm not a fan of the EV technology in terms of, when I think of, what's best for families, I think, well, probably a car that lasts a quarter of a century and 1,000,000 miles. If you want that, you're going to buy a Toyota or a Honda with an internal combustion engine. That's easy to repair because you can go to a local shop. It's not locked in like technology devices that are EVs. Your local AutoZone can't do a repair for a nuanced piece of computer software or a nuanced thing on a Tesla. It's locked in. You got one choice to fix that vehicle. It's Tesla. Just like an iPhone. Both engineered to be thin, sexy, look amazing, but at the end of the day, disposable. You won't remember them at the end of the time. And it's not a good return on investment. It's a terrible ROI. Show me a Tesla that's been on the road for 7 years with the original battery and the original motors. No. But internal combustion engine, absolutely. Now, a lot of these, and again, throughout the years, during some of those pivotal times when they needed to actually transition to new technology or become more agile, that's when the unions strike and hurt them the most. Back then, unions could exist in, I was going to say, some fashion in the 1950s. In the 1950s, the world had just ended from a war a couple years prior. The only country that really had the infrastructure to build vehicles on a mass scale was the United States. Part of the benefit of not having any conflicts on our own home mainland. So during that time, you had Chrysler, Ford, General Motors. They thrived. Chrysler did great. GM did great. Ford did great. Detroit was the richest city on the planet at one point. And because there's very little competition, they could afford to have really great profit margins. And the unions, like I'm trying to think of a good metaphor of someone who's exorbitantly greedy. They saw the big profit margins, and they said, okay, well, we're going to want everything. We want it all. We want it all. So huge pensions, huge medical coverage, huge salaries. Again, basing on tenure, not performance. And by the 1970s, they basically near bankrupt the company. And guess what came? Competition. The best, most reliable vehicles on the planet. It's no coincidence they're made by companies that don't have unions. Honda, Tesla, Toyota, Tesla not so much with the reliability, but the percentage of parts made in the USA is actually more American than GM or Ford, as well as Chrysler. But they make the most reliable cars on the planet. Honda, which also owns Acura, brand sharing. Well, you know what I mean. Fancy luxury brand, new logo. But Honda and Toyota, they don't have unions. That means there's less cost. And they also have a superior culture of Kaizen, where the culture of Toyota is to constantly improve. Like on the assembly line, a great metaphor for the two companies, contrasting GM to Toyota. On Toyota, when they have an assembly line and cars come down, every employee is empowered to actually stop. If they see something wrong with the vehicle, they stop. They fix it right there. Now, General Motors is the antithesis. It's kind of like McDonald's. If they see an issue, they just keep going along the assembly line. They might fix it, or they might not at the end of the day. Just keep pushing it out. McDonald's it, which for many years that worked for GM because they were the largest producer by volume of units sold. But every year the profit margin is getting more and more, getting thinner and thinner and thinner. Now, the unions right now see that GM is making a profit. So these companies are getting close to billions of profits. But all that money is being sucked back into R&D. It's being put back into the company. And you have this economic uncertainty. People think the economy is going to crash. Michael Burberry, is it Burry or Burberry? I think Burberry is a douchey cosmetics thing. But Michael, the guy who bet against the housing market and became rich beyond his wildest beliefs, he just bet against the S&P 500. So he's been right once in a big way. There's a lot of speculation. Will he be right again? I believe he put 1.2 or 1.5 billion dollars against the S&P 500. So he is betting that the S&P 500 stocks, all those companies will go down, and that's where he would make more money. So if you're a company like GM or Ford, you're going to want some cash in the bank because if there's hard times, you're going to want emergency funds. Now, also, they're making lots of billions, but they're putting it back into the company. So you look at Ford. Ford Blue, that's the Ford everyone likes. Your traditional Ford, the F-150, the Mustang, the real one, with 3 pedals, manual transmission, a V8. That was the legacy Ford. You also have Ford Commercial, which is the commercial line of all the vehicles. You look at the F-350, 450, 550, the big monster trucks. And then the third division is Ford E, which is their EV division. Their EV division is losing billions, but the gas-powered company, the legacy Ford Blue, is making billions in profits. So they're moving those profits to the EV part of the company. And again, the theory is, like many technologies, over time, it will become profitable with their EV technologies. And there's a lot of setup costs. So the unions are demanding the most that they ever have. They want the pensions back, which again, is no longer competitive to be a thing. The only place pensions are really a thing is the public sector, which is the most corrupt practice where you have people in the public sector supporting politicians get elected, and they get kickbacks in the form of nice juicy contracts and nice juicy raises. It's corrupt as all hell. Not enough people actually talk about that issue, but that can't exist in the private sector or the real world where you have to be fiscally responsible. So as these companies are competing and going against each other more and more, I can't help but think, again, one of the largest contributions to at least GM and Chrysler going bankrupt in 2009 were unions. Don't get me wrong, the executives were also greedy. I believe Ford, one of the executives, they didn't get bailed out, but they came close. They got hundreds of millions of dollars in bonuses. They didn't look. I don't know anyone who agreed with that sentiment, unless you're paying them to buy them out of a contract to make them go away. But it's one of those instances where, during the time where these companies need to be the leanest. I mean, GM, Mary Barra, she's very adamant. She wants to cut a couple $1 billion from their budget. They're buying people out of their contracts, so they're going to people who are salaried, and they're saying, "Hey, we need to lay off a certain amount of people. Instead, we're asking people to volunteer, and we'll buy them out of their contract. So they'll pay you for the full contract, then the contract ends, they leave." Kind of like basically being paid to go away. GM is trying to cut every penny they can because they have to compete with Tesla, who has a huge lead on EV technologies. And GM in particular, Mary Barra, the CEO, she said by 2030, Cadillac will be 100% EV. Is that a good idea? I don't personally think so, but that's where they're going to go. Personally, the best Cadillac is the CTS, I think it was a CT4, one of my buddies got. It's got a stick shift and a twin turbo V6. But again, GM likes to make something really good that kill it. And she wants GM as a whole brand to be 100% EV by 2035. That's going to take billions of dollars, not just in research and development, but you're going to have to re-engineer your whole factories and build new factories and warehouses to facilitate the unique components and unique assemblies for EV vehicles. So I can't help but think, when you have the best competitors on the planet kicking your ass 7 days a week, and their cars are going to be cheaper because on average, you look at the UAW fees, and again, one of my disdains is the UAW gives a lot to politicians. A lot of the money isn't going to the actual people in part of it as well. Also, if you're being forced to join anything, it's kind of the antithesis of being an American. But during these precarious times, I don't think they're going to make it. The competition is heating up. And people, right now, Americans are hugely more price conscientious than they used to be because you can no longer get a 0% car loan. Those days are gone. There used to be they're gone for a while. But with record high rates for borrowing money these days, that's even less people buying a car. And when they are buying a car, in the rare instances, they're even more concerned about price. Because again, the American dollar is being stretched so thin. And again, I blame politicians left and right for ruining everything with inflation and myriad of other issues. But at the end of the day, Americans are struggling to make ends meet, and new cars are getting more and more expensive. Another thing I don't like about EVs is they cost more, and they're just not great ROI. They're disposable. And again, I'm not saying they'll always be that way. Technology moves quickly. There might be a new battery technology we might not know about today. It's going to come out tomorrow and change the whole game. That could very well happen. But right now, and especially when it comes to right to repair laws, the best bet is still going to be an inline four, or at least when I think about the most successful car in history by number of units sold, it's Toyota Corolla. Get a nice inline four internal combustion engine. It'll last you a quarter of a century or 1,000,000 miles. And at the end of the day, I think a lot of Americans are going to come back to that theory and thinking, what's going to last my family the longest amount of time with the least amount of maintenance? What could my buddy Bob down the street at his independent shop, what could he work on? What could he order parts on? Is it an EV? No. Now, these lawsuits being brought against GM and Stellantis is going to increase the cost. Do you think it's going to make management happy? Absolutely not. So again, at the end of the day, kind of a cliche in and of itself, the unions are just bullying the companies more and more. And I don't know what Mary Barra is going to do. She's the CEO of General Motors. That's a company of the big three that I follow the most, have the most proficiency in regard to just business acumen. And I know the unions did give up a lot during the 2009 bankruptcies, and they did give a lot. They gave up some stuff to help Ford, so they didn't go bankrupt. But at the end of the day, it's not really competitive anymore. You can't pay someone $75 an hour to put a tire in a car. Or no, it was 2009 when GM went bankrupt. They're paying kids, or I say kids, they're grown-ass men, $65 to put a tire in a car. That does include healthcare benefits. But at the end of the day, what the shareholder cares about and what the consumer who buys the car cares about is the total cost, extra cost you're paying someone to put a tire in a car. That's not competitive at all. And maybe if you were to have a concession with the unions, I would say instead of medical benefits, instead of pay, offer them stock. But I don't think they'll want that because they would have to increase their performance exponentially, because then they would have a vetted interest in the company. I believe one of the reasons Tesla is so successful is because the employees are given stock. They have an incentive to work like hell, be efficient, and make the best car that they can. They don't always, with the gaps and everything, I know. But they're investing in the company. I don't know in terms of GM and the big three, but I don't think they give the union stock options. I don't think they'd want them. They just want, many of them, not all, calm down in the comment section, but they just want easy money. And at the end of the day, I think it'll kill the big three. Let me know in the comments. And if you're part of the union, let me know. I'd love to hear your perspective. Even if we don't agree with each other, I always appreciate more data, and I'll update the video appropriately. And I do appreciate you going back and forth. So great way to actually help the video out is leave a comment and click the subscribe button. I know it's cliche to say, but yeah, I would say the outlook for GM and Stellantis is not good. And again, it wasn't the only reason these companies went bankrupt, but it was a huge variable in the equation of why they went belly up in 2009. So in terms of having more contention, again, that's whole kind of like a divorce attorney, which I find abhorrent. The whole purpose of the union and a divorce lawyer is conflict. That's when they prosper. Which is why I always say the best relationships are always, one-on-one, whether that be an employee working with their employer or husband and wife coming together to talk it out. But I digress. It'll be interesting to see what happens to the big three. But I would say for GM and Stellantis, with the current state of the government, they'll probably have to pay some stupid amount of money for the lawsuit, just settle. And of course, the cost will be passed on to you and I, the consumers. Well, not me, thankfully. I love my Honda. It's got 3 pedals, stick shift, as every car should have. But I digress. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to tune in again. Again, we're trying to get to 3,000 subscribers by the end of September. Actually, 4,000 if we really swing it. So I really appreciate you clicking that button. Also, taking the time to like and comment helps me out. Appreciate the feedback and insight you have with these topics. Love to hear about your experiences. Also, and lastly, don't forget to tell your family, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, heck, tell your enemies, tell anyone and everyone. Just stay safe and fight the good fight.